Hello friends, I hope the questions which I have done previously in part 1 and part 2 of this video have helped you in developing the approach of writing answer. Now in test 10, 2 questions are remaining. I will be doing these 2 questions now. And some students have written that whatever content I am giving, this is too much and it is running in 7 and 8 pages. So the thing is, in social sciences there are a lot of ideas. It is up to you how many ideas, what all angle you want to catch. So my approach is you should be given the comprehensive information, and depending upon the question asked in the exam you can make it short. Okay, so at least you should know which is relevant for the given question, but I try to give you a comprehensive answer. So maybe today's answers you may find it are more brief because you all feel that too much content is difficult to digest. So let us do the question number 7. The question number 7 is, as EU at present is losing its political moorings, full stop. It can emerge as a strategic actor only if it asserts its sovereignty over political security and diplomacy. Fine. So this is a statement that I have picked from the French President Macron's speech, but this is one such question that can deal with the various issues in EU quite comprehensively. Fine. Now the thing is, as EU at present is losing its political moorings. This is first thing. So I have to pay attention to this. At present means there may be some time earlier where EU was playing an effective role. Fine. So I have to substantiate this point of view that at present EU is losing. It means earlier. Okay. It means earlier EU must have played a prominent role. Now political moorings or political standing or political voice. So EU at present may not be a strong political voice. Right now, the world is shaped by the two major powers, US and China. And EU is no more even a pole that it could have been potentially. Now, it can emerge as a strategic actor. Strategic actor means here a significant actor. Now, the thing is, what is the importance of EU emerging as a significant actor? Only if it asserts its sovereignty over its security and diplomacy. Sovereignty over its security and diplomacy, because for long EU has been a junior partner of USA. Fine. So in this answer, I have to show that I must have some examples which show that EU is losing its political moorings. Second, I should have an example to show that once EU was important, then I have to find out why EU is in such situation and how EU will be benefited if EU asserts its sovereignty. Okay, so this is how you break the question. So what is the first challenge? First challenge is at present EU is losing its political moorings. Fine. So there used to be a time when Europe had dominated the world. When was that time? That time was since the beginning of the modern age. Fine. Now, after the beginning of modern age and till the 19th century, Europe has been the center of the world. In 20th century, the center of gravity shifted towards USA. Still, because EU was a junior partner of USA and they were on the same plank, you can call it as the Atlantic century continuing. But now the balance of power is shifting towards Asia or Asia Pacific. Right now we see that the international politics is primarily shaped by the relationship between US and China, and the voice which EU used to have, EU does not have today. Fine. Now, to come to this point, at present I will talk about the earlier scenario. So in earlier scenario, I will go back to the 17th, 18th and 19th century, when Europe dominated the globe, as and Europe was a center of hard power as well as soft power. Fine. And then the Second World War devastated, but fortunately Europe there was a resurgence in the formation of European Union. Fine. So this is how I will link and I will try to give a comparative view that this was EU once and now this is EU. And then I will give the introduction of European Union. So in 1952, beginning with 6 countries and European and coal and steel community, it emerged a bloc of 28 nations and it emerged a common market, and besides this it also emerged as a monetary union. Fine. And there was a time when Euro started giving challenge to the hegemony of US dollar also. Some people believe that the US war on Iraq in 2003 has a angle related to the rise of EU, and it is reported that Saddam Hussein had some understanding where the oil trade was to be in euro. Since then we see the crisis has been coming in EU in one way or the other. The prominent crisis that has spoiled the situation was the 2008 global financial crisis. In EU, it became the sovereign debt crisis. Now, after that, because of the sovereign debt crisis which EU faced, there has been the growth of the rightist forces in EU. Fine. EU is based on which ideology? EU is based on the ideology of liberalism. Because of global financial crisis, what is happening? Liberalism is in the state of decline, and we see either the rise of left or the rise of right. Rise of left is fine, but the rise of rise of left is also not good, but the rise of right gives the final blow to the integration experiment of EU. And the rightists in EU have got the huge political support once the crisis in Middle East, the refugee crisis from Syria and other increases, and these rightists could give the color of Islamophobia, anti-immigration sentiments, which have further given rise to the ultra nationalist parties, even in the countries like Germany. Okay, and if we see at present, EU is facing the worst crisis. The worst crisis in the form of it has not been able to recover from the economic shock. The next crisis to EU came in the form of a refugee crisis. After that, the next crisis to European Union has come in the form of US President Trump's approach towards EU, and there is a trade war also, and China's attempt to strengthen its presence in the region and increase the assertiveness of Russia. And then the corona crisis has also shown that the so-called Shenzhen area open borders have been closed and countries lost that public good approach, and they were concerned about storing the necessary medical supplies, and when the EU unity was needed the most, it appeared disappearing very fast. So this is a situation of EU which you will have to write in the minimum possible words. Now the next is today's EU's standing, where EU is failing. The most important place where you can say that EU has lost the political moorings is the Iran's nuclear issue. So despite EU's apprehensions, they could not prevent US coming out of the agreement. And we know that the European countries are located next to the Middle East, and for the peace and stability of Europe, the peace and stability in Middle East is very important, and that is why the way EU was looking at the Iranian issue, USA's position has been altogether different. Similarly, EU is unable to play any important role in the Libya at present, and EU is losing the leadership to the countries like Russia and Turkey. Libya is also a very important entry point in the southern Europe. Again, neither EU could play any critical role in the climate change nor in Doha talks. So US President came out of the Paris Climate Agreement, and WTO is now just about to collapse. So nowhere we see the type of a political moorings, the type of a political voice EU was once is evident. Fine. Now the second part of the question is, if EU has to emerge, as a strategic actor. Now EU emerging as a strategic actor means EU should emerge as a important pole in international politics. Because if you are not having a strategic presence, you will not be able to protect and preserve your interest. So in the interest of EU must regain its lost space. After that, you can also say that emergence of EU as a strategic actor is not only in the interest of EU, not only in EU's interest, it is also a public good. Public good means which is in the benefit of all. Fine. So, especially when China is having a very intimidating approach, US is not willing to act as a hegemon or altruistic hegemon. The world will have to look towards the other middle powers like India and EU. EU is a public good. EU has been a source of peace and stability, as so not just in the interest of EU but in the wider interest, EU must regain its voice. And then you can add an angle from India's point of view. In the present situation of global anarchy, EU appears to be India's important partner. Okay? And then EU must regain its control over its security and diplomacy. French president has suggested the formation of alternative forces of Europe in place of NATO. He calls NATO as brain dead organization. Similarly, even in diplomatic sphere, but in your answer you will have to write, is it going to be easy for EU? So it seems it is certainly not going to be EU, and this is the time that EU requires the visionary leaders like Robert Schuman, who thought about the peace. EU, in amidst the rise of populist leaders, EU is in need of a visionary statesman. Okay, so I hope you have understood this. So now I am dictating this answer. So you must be having your copies. You can note down the answer, right? So first paragraph will be, at present EU is losing its political moorings. Fine. So you can say that up till 19th century or till Second World War, Europe as a continent has been playing the dominant role. Fine. Second World War devastated Europe and the center of gravity shifted towards USA. Though Europe was completely devastated, yet it could recover fast under USA's Marshall Plan. Fine. The main objective of USA was to support EU so that EU becomes a major force of containment of its arch rival USSR. Okay. Right, next paragraph. The European countries, after suffering a long period of war and destruction, took initiative to bring a fundamental transformation in the state of their relations. Okay, now you can underline fundamental transformation, right? The French Foreign Minister Robert Schuman and French statesman Jean Monnet conceived of the European coal and steel community. Right. Over a period of time, EU became a bloc of 28 countries, a free trade zone, a common market, as well as a monetary union. You can write in bracket Maastricht Treaty. Next, in 2007 Lisbon Treaty, EU has also established the common defense and foreign policy platforms. Next paragraph. Unfortunately, at present, EU is facing from the existential crisis. Brexit has given a big blow to the EU project. The existential crisis of European Union can be traced back to the 2003 US war on Iraq. It is alleged that the main reason behind the war was to contain the rising hegemony of Euro. It has been reported that Saddam Hussein has entered into an agreement with European countries for the oil trade in Euro. Any instability in Middle East is going to impact the peace and stability in European Union. After 2003 war, then came 2008, the sovereign debt crisis, which became contagion, and since then all prominent economies of EU are facing crisis, the problem of unemployment. The problem of unemployment has given rise to the populist parties which have put the entire blame on the EU and which profess the protectionist approach. In 2014, since 2014 onwards, EU is facing a big challenge because of the flow of refugees and migrants from Middle East, Afghanistan and other countries. Okay, the flow of refugees has further created the divisions. It is to be noted that Europe has never been as integrated as it used to look from outside. There have been the multiple fault lines in Europe. The division between the rich Europe and the poor Europe, the new Europe and the old Europe. Okay. EU, which had been once an important pole in international politics, is today losing its political moorings or its positions. Some of the examples can be EU's role in the crisis in Syria. EU is unable to play any role in bringing stability in Libya. EU is losing leadership to the authoritarian states like Turkey and Russia. Next, the most important example can be which show the EU's lost political moorings is the Iranian peace agreement. US had withdrawn from it unilaterally and thus giving rise to greater instability and threats to the peace. EU's lost political moorings are also evident in, for example, inability of EU to prevent US coming out of Paris Agreement, inability of EU to ensure that the dispute settlement body of WTO continues to operate, and the COVID crisis has given a big blow to EU where these countries have not reflected the spirit of brotherhood and have been concerned about their own populations. Hence, it is suggested that EU needs to be reformed. EU needs to address its challenges if it wants to be a strategic actor. It is important for EU to be a strategic actor because if EU is not a strategic actor, it will not be able to protect its core interest from trade to climate change, from security to the social stability. And for that, it has been realized that European countries have outsourced their security to USA. They have become the junior partners, and there is a realization that USA has used EU for its own interest. EU states confined themselves with the model of the trading states and find themselves in a vulnerable position. So EU has to bounce back. Bouncing back of EU is not only important for EU, it is also important for the wide peace and stability because EU is also a public good. Okay, so in the end we can quote from Thucydides. You all must be knowing the very famous statement of Thucydides that ultimately the strong do what they can do and weak have to submit what they are supposed to. It means in international politics, it is difficult to protect and preserve the interest of the country without developing its power without developing the power. That includes a combination of a hard power and soft power. EU had relied primarily on soft power and EU has ignored the hard power. Okay, so that's all for this question. I hope you are able to understand the nuances of this question. Now I will take up question number 8. Question number 8 is, discuss the future of WTO. What are the current challenges in front of WTO? ठीक है? So discuss the future of WTO. So what exactly is WTO? WTO is an organization or institution which has replaced GATT and which sets the rules of free trade. So you can directly write the answer itself. So discuss the future of WTO. First paragraph you write the introduction. You can write that WTO is a successor of GATT. It came into existence in 1995 at Marrakesh, Morocco. Next you write that the role of WTO is to formulate the rules to ensure the progress towards the free trade. It also provides a platform for the settlement of the trade-related disputes. In the mandate of WTO includes the responsibility of the capacity building of developing countries. WTO works on certain principles like MFN status, national treatment, differentiated responsibilities for developing countries. Presently, 90% of the global trade is conducted under WTO. Okay? Then you will have to discuss the future of WTO. Now, the future of WTO is again in crisis. And why the future of WTO is in crisis? So basically, if we look from a broader angle, WTO is to facilitate the multilateralism in trade. And since 2008 and especially in 2019, because of the COVID crisis, multilateralism is in the state of collapse. International organizations not just WTO, but the international organizations like World Health Organization and even United Nations is facing uncertainty. This is a broader example of, this is WTO's existential threat to WTO's existence is a broader or is an example of the broader politics, the broader issue, that is the end of globalization and multilateralism. Okay, now we have to give the reasons why this is happening. So you can always show that to certain extent economic factors have shaped the role, but more than the economic factors, the geopolitical factors are shaping the situation of multilateralism. The current controversy related to WHO, the current problems in UN Security Council, inability to take any action in case of COVID, the current problem in WTO, the current problem in European Union, the current deadlock in Doha talks and in climate change, all have the answers primarily in the geopolitical rivalry between US and China. Okay, and the crisis of WTO can be seen from the fact that since 2001 the member countries have not been able to arrive at any solution over Doha talks. There was some temporary success at Bali, but the WTO talks or WTO agreements are not moving anywhere. Okay, after this, what you can write is the recent crisis, the most important body of WTO, that is the dispute settlement body. It has become dysfunctional because US has stopped the appointment of the arbitrators on this body. Presently, it has only one arbitrator and the WTO rules require the quorum of at least 3. Okay. So, what is at the root of the crisis? At the root of the crisis is the geopolitical rivalry, and to quote certain scholars, you can note down, I am dictating it. Now, with respect to the challenges and the current situation and the road ahead, you can note down the views of some experts with respect to WTO. Fine. And in this context, the first reference you can give is of Peter Draper. Okay, so Peter Draper is a executive director at the Center of International Trade, University of Adelaide. Fine. So what he suggests is that the days ahead of the days coming for WTO are not good. The reason being, the predictions are because of COVID crisis, the world trade is expected to decline in the double digits from 13% to 32%. Okay, and if the world trade is expected to decline from 13 to 32%, this does not present an optimistic scenario for the future of WTO. Okay, hence he suggests that what the world requires is a robust, reformed and resilient WTO. He also suggests that it is essential that WTO works in close cooperation with other international organizations. Okay. Now, another scholar you can quote here is Frederick Erikson. Frederick Erikson, there is one think tank, ECIPE, situated at Brussels. Fine. And his analysis is more about the problem of WTO. Fine. So point number one, what he says that WTO is facing a systemic crisis. First point. Okay. Second, the systematic crisis is because of the competing and conflicting visions about WTO between the developed countries and developing countries. This is very important, competing and conflicting visions among the developed countries and the developing countries. Third point is developed countries want WTO 2.0, a new WTO, according to them, in accordance to the new reality. Their focus is on the situation of China and India. They should not be having the status of developing countries. And whereas the developing countries want further strengthening of WTO 1.0. 0. Fine. Right. It is because of these competing visions WTO is facing the existential threat. Fine. In the end, you can also mention about the views of WTO Director Azevedo. What is the theme of his idea? His theme of his idea is, if countries are looking from the recovery of the fallout of COVID-19, world trade is important, and for that WTO has to be revived, but WTO in present form may not work, and there is some upgradation that is needed. So you can write that the WTO Director General Azevedo has mentioned that if countries want to recover from the fallout of COVID, the most important factor will be keeping the markets open. Right? Only promotion of trade can lead to recovery, and promotion of global trade requires multilateral institutions like WTO to function. However, he accepts that WTO rules have to be updated, reformed, and changed. Okay, so this is how you can write the answer of the current scenario of WTO. I hope this has helped you, and very soon we will come with the discussion on the test series paper number 11. Till then, goodbye.